In 1818, when Mary Shelley published Frankenstein, she subtitled it The Modern Prometheus. Most readers miss the subtitle, but it may be the most important clue we have to understanding the novel and the future risks of artificial intelligence. Welcome back to The Beauty of Books, where we explore the transformative power of great works of literature. My name is Ben, and today we're talking about the classic novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, Frankenstein, as I mentioned, was subtitled The Modern Prometheus. In the introduction, it says Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, was begun in the summer of 1816 in response to a challenge. The poet Lord Byron sought to discover who among his friends could write the best horror story. The winner, an 18-year-old who called herself Mary Shelley, reworked the story as a novel, and the results were published anonymously in 1818. Now, it is a pleasure to go through this again. I forgot how amazing this novel is. Frankenstein is truly one of a kind, the novel that invented, essentially, science fiction. Before this, there really was no genre of science fiction, and since then, it seems like there's nothing but science fiction. No, I'm just kidding. But science fiction is a huge genre now, and we have to thank Frankenstein for that. But Frankenstein is more than just an interesting novel about a monster. Obviously, it is one of the most prolific novels. It's a novel that is made into hundreds of television shows and movies. If you were going to watch them all, it would take you forever just to get through all of the different adaptations, all of the different spin-offs, all of the different novels that are written about it. Probably Frankenstein is the most famous monster in literature. Dracula, I would say, is the other big contender. But Frankenstein is interesting because it connects to an ancient myth, the myth of Prometheus. Now, the subtitle is no accident. The whole premise of Frankenstein, a man, Victor Frankenstein, creates a monster. The monster is not named Frankenstein. The man who creates the monster's name is Frankenstein. That's something that sometimes people mix up. But the monster, Frankenstein's monster, is a reanimated corpse built of various human parts. And this is the first time that this was done in this novel. Now, basically, the reason it's called the modern Prometheus is because 2,500 years before, there is a very famous myth in ancient Greek mythology called the myth of Prometheus. Now, this myth is told in varying different ways. There isn't one standard version, but the essential story is that Prometheus was a titan, either a titan who helped create humans out of clay, or in some iterations he's not. But regardless, he is a titan who goes against the wishes of the Olympian gods, against the wishes of Zeus, and gives fire to mankind. He steals fire from the gods and gives it to the man. Now, this is the introduction of power and the ability to create what essentially could be thought of as a monster. What can men do with fire? They can war, they can burn, they can pillage, can burn down whole forests. And the gods punish Prometheus. His punishment is that he's chained to a rock and his liver is eaten by a eagle who represents Zeus every day. And then it regrows at night and then it repeats. Now, the reason the ancient Greeks chose the liver is because that was what they believed represented human emotions. So the human emotions being decimated because of his risk, because of what he did for mankind. Now, giving mankind fire was a gift, but it was also a gift that came with a huge responsibility. And when we look through human history, we see that mankind has not always been responsible. Learning how to cultivate fire is not the sin. Using fire to burn, to torture, to cause destruction, that is the error. So flashing forward 200 years ago, during the Romantic era, the ancient myths became important again. Mary Shelley was looking back on Prometheus. Many other writers were looking back on other great um, Greek myths, but Prometheus represented the lone genius in the Romantic era. He was essentially what Victor Frankenstein is in the novel, the man who goes against all good sense just because it's possible and wants to reanimate a corpse. Now, all of us today might look at that and say, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea. But the truth is, just because something is dangerous and the risks are very high has never stopped humans from trying. And in the era of the Romantics, in the era when Frankenstein was written, that was such an important view of the world. The great men going and conquering other nations, traveling over the oceans, that was celebrated at the time. And Mary Shelley was a little countercultural. You know, her approach is that's a bit of a horror story. There's a certain component to that that could be very dangerous. You know, at the time, medical technologies were starting to improve rapidly, and it was in the decades after that that it would be even more so. Um, and people started to imagine what it would look like. We can bring humans back to life. We can animate corpses again. But Mary Shelley saw this differently. That is a dark path. And what that looks like is it looks like Frankenstein's monster. And that brings us to the future, which is today. Today, we are also grappling with these ideas of not, in this case, reanimating a corpse. Technology has made it very clear that creating a human, reanimating humans is uh, beyond our current technological abilities by a long shot. But creating a form of intelligence using uh, algorithms to create aggregated human intelligence, putting it all together that can lead to decision making, problem solving, and limited, what we might call thinking, although there's a huge philosophical debate there about what exactly entails thinking, but something that emulates thinking is starting to emerge in artificial intelligence. And so the parallels are striking here. The parallels between the ancient Greek myth of Prometheus giving fire and that fire being misused. Mankind, the great lone genius, the modern Prometheus of Victor Frankenstein, bringing back life, you know, using his hubris, flying too close to the sun, to borrow the imagery from another great Greek myth, the myth of Icarus. And in the modern era, moving fast and breaking things, right? Trying to get to the point when we have these new technologies. But the same story applies today that applied back then. The myth and the risk here is not that giving fire to mankind was inherently wrong. It's that is mankind ready to have fire? The myth in the Romantic era was not can a lone genius create a uh, a human, reanimate a human. It's is he going to be responsible for that creation? And that really brings us to the crux of the story here. The real problem in Frankenstein is not that Victor Frankenstein created a monster. It's that he neglects the monster, and the monster comes back for vengeance. Now, I think all of us sense this as well in our own lives to a certain extent. People feel, you see this in a lot of literature and everyone, and how we notice this, maybe like if things are going poorly, you blame the universe, you blame God, you blame someone. And that's kind of what happens in Frankenstein. Except in this case, there's no question of what to blame. It's very clear his creator was Victor Frankenstein, and his creator abandoned him. His creator did not create a mate for him. His creator was like the, there's a lot of biblical imagery as well in Frankenstein, but gone wrong. Instead of creating a man with love, he created a monster with loneliness. Now, this is the major risk with modern artificial intelligence. It's not that artificial intelligence is a tool that is inherently destructive. The question is, are we wise enough to use the tool? The real error, the real misstep with Victor Frankenstein is not that he could technically succeed because he did succeed technically. He was very successful in his technical approach, but he lacked the wisdom. He didn't have the wisdom to know what was entailed, what would it mean to create a monster, to create a being. It wasn't even that the monster was had to be a monster, right? It was a being. But in Victor Frankenstein's mind, he created a monster, and so he was a monster. So we have to ask ourselves, with companies like Anthropic and OpenAI creating artificial intelligence, is this something that we're ready for? Do we, as a civilization, as humanity, have the wisdom that we need in order to make sure that we are not going to create a monster? Now, I think that the results are still to be determined. The good news is that we are not at a place yet where catastrophe has already struck. But this is one of the ways in which reading great works of literature and understanding how Frankenstein is built on Promethean myths, this can give us wisdom rather than just intelligence that can help inform our decision making as we enter this new world where we've realized, bringing the gods fire is not existent, so that can't happen. Bringing, you know, animated bodies back to life is not feasible, but creating intelligence, that might just be something we can do. How are we going to react to that if and when we accomplish that? Are we going to see a monster, or are we going to see a tool that we can use to better humanity? And I think the choice is up to us. We have to read great works like Frankenstein and also like the myth of Prometheus in order to make sure that we understand where we're going and what we want to want in the future. All right, everyone. Until next time.